night. Crystal chandeliers glowed, laughter filled the air, and a crowd of powerful businessmen, politicians, and family friends gathered to celebrate his 60th birthday. Cameras flashed as his wife Sarah kissed his cheek and whispered, "You deserve the world, my love." Their 2 children, Tommy and Eduora, stood beside him, smiling wide for photos, calling him the greatest father alive. But Darius could feel it. The warmth was fake, their smiles rehearsed. As the party carried on, music played, champagne poured, and gold confetti rained from the ceiling. Darius stepped away for a quiet moment on the balcony, just to breathe. That's when he heard it, voices coming from behind the curtain near the hall. He froze. It was his children. Tommy laughed as he said, "When the old man finally sleeps and doesn't wake up, we'll still make the headlines." Eduora added softly, "Imagine it, the cars, the estates, the company, all ours." Sarah's voice joined in, calm but sharp. "Then we must act fast before the board tries to take control. We'll move the funds before the will is read." Darius stood still, his chest tightening as every word cut deeper than a knife. The very people he loved most, the family he built everything for, were plotting his death like a business deal. He stepped back quietly, his face calm but his heart burning. When he returned to the crowd, he smiled wider than ever, shaking hands, thanking guests, and cutting the giant golden cake. Cameras caught him laughing, but no one saw the tears in his eyes. Later that night, as fireworks lit the sky over Lagos, Darius stood by the window of his study, staring into the distance. The words echoed in his mind. "If the old man sleeps and doesn't wake up." He took a deep breath, poured himself a glass of wine and whispered, "They want me gone. Then let's see how they live without me." That was the night Chief Darius Cohn decided they would get exactly what they wished for. The morning after his birthday, Chief Darius Cohn didn't touch his breakfast. He sat by the window, staring at the garden where he used to play with Tommy and Eduora when they were little. Their laughter used to be his pride, now their greed was his pain. That night's conversation replayed in his mind like a curse. He felt betrayed, not just as a father, but as a man who had built everything from nothing. Later that day, he called 2 people he knew he could still trust, his lawyer, Barrister Colonel Adio, and his longtime driver, Matteo. They met in the private study, the one with soundproof walls, the one even Sarah didn't know about. Darius poured them each a drink and spoke quietly, his voice low but steady. "I've built an empire," he said, "but I failed to build loyalty in my own home." Colonel frowned. "Chief, what are you planning?" Darius leaned back, eyes cold with decision. "A test. Painful one. I'm going to give them what they want. My death." The room went silent. Matteo's glass nearly slipped from his hand. "Sir, you can't mean—" "Oh, I mean every word," Darius interrupted. "We'll draft a fake will, a death announcement, and a full story the press will believe. I want to see what my family becomes when they think I'm gone." Barrister Colonel hesitated. "This could destroy them." Darius smiled sadly. "If greed doesn't destroy them first, maybe truth will." They worked late into the night, planning every detail. The will was rewritten, temporary, fake, but convincing. It mentioned large sums, hidden accounts, and assets that would soon vanish if not claimed quickly. Everything designed to expose their hunger. Matteo, trembling with loyalty, agreed to drive the chief to a safe location once the plan began. Before leaving, Darius looked at them both. "If they love money more than blood," he whispered, "let's see how far they'll go." 3 days later, news broke across every major network. Billionaire Chief Darius Cohn missing after yacht explosion off Lagos coast. Photos of the wreckage floated on TV screens and social media. Sarah fainted dramatically for the cameras. Eduora cried in designer sunglasses. And Tommy gave statements about continuing their father's legacy. But miles away, in a quiet coastal town, Darius sat in a small rented cottage, alive, watching the coverage in silence. His reflection in the window looked older, colder, but sharper than ever. "They wanted my death," he said softly, turning off the TV. "Let's see what they do with it." The news of Chief Darius Cohn's death spread like fire across Nigeria. Every TV station, every online page, every radio headline screamed the same thing. Billionaire chief Darius Cohn dies in tragic yacht explosion. Photos of his smiling face filled the screens, and people across the country mourned a man they respected, a man they thought was gone forever. But inside the Cohn mansion, things looked very different. Behind the drawn curtains and fake wails, the air was thick with greed. Sarah, dressed in black lace and pearls, dabbed at her dry eyes for the cameras outside. But once the reporters left, her tears disappeared. She turned to her children and said coldly, "Enough of this drama. We have business to handle." That night, instead of planning a memorial, they gathered around the dining table for what Tommy jokingly called their family meeting. Expensive wine was poured, laughter returned, and the mood quickly shifted from grief to greed. Eudora raised her glass with a smirk. "To Father's spirit," she said dramatically. "May it guide us, straight to the vault." Tommy burst out laughing while Sarah didn't even pretend to disapprove. Within hours, Sarah was on the phone with the family banker. Her voice was sharp, commanding. "This is Mrs. Cohn. My husband's accounts need to be accessed immediately. We have urgent matters." The banker hesitated. Protocol required the will to be read first, but Sarah was relentless. "Don't test me," she hissed. "I'll replace you before the week ends." In another room, Tommy was busy calling company directors, trying to seize control of Cohn Group. "My father would have wanted me in charge," he told them confidently. At the same time, Eudora was already arguing with her mother over who should get the diamond necklace and the house in Banana Island. "Father promised me that house," Eudora snapped. Sarah rolled her eyes. "He promised you a husband, not a mansion." Tommy laughed. "Keep fighting. I'll take the cars and the shares, the real wealth." The argument turned ugly fast. Voices rose, plates shattered, and greed burned brighter than grief ever could. None of them noticed the small black cameras hidden in the corners of the room, watching, recording, capturing every word. Cameras that Darius himself had installed weeks before the accident. While they toasted to their future, he watched from a small screen in his safe house, expression unreadable. Each cruel laugh, each selfish remark, he saw it all. Eudora's fake tears, Tommy's arrogance, Sarah's coldness. It was all there, proof of everything he had suspected and feared. When they finally raised their glasses one last time that night, Tommy grinned and said, "To the Cohn legacy and to new beginnings." Far away, Darius whispered to himself, "No, my children, to your endings." From his hidden safe house, Darius sat alone at night, watching every recording that Matteo delivered to him. Each clip felt like a dagger, every smile, every secret, every lie. What he uncovered next broke him more than any betrayal ever could. The first truth came from a dinner meeting Sarah had, not with a lawyer or a priest, but with Chief Nkem, Darius's oldest business rival. The man he had once accused of stealing contracts, the one he'd sworn never to trust. Darius watched as Sarah held Nkem's hand across the table, her voice soft and familiar. "Now that he's gone, we can finally merge everything, your company and mine." Nkem smiled smugly. "Our company, you mean? You've waited long enough, Sarah." Darius had his time. Darius froze the video and leaned back in his chair. His fingers trembled, not with sadness, but with cold disbelief. She didn't even wait a week. The second betrayal came from his son, Tommy, the one Darius once called his future. The recordings showed him meeting with Nkem's daughter, Zara, in a luxury hotel. Between kisses and champagne, Tommy handed her a flash drive. "These are the investor reports," he said, smirking. "Tell your father the board's next move. And remind him, I want my cut." Zara laughed. "You'll get more than money when this is over." Darius felt his jaw tighten. His son was selling out the family company. For a woman, for greed, for power. Then came the final blow. Eudora. Sweet, soft-spoken Eudora, who everyone believed was the heart of the family. The footage revealed her late-night calls to a man in London, her so-called fiancé, who was nothing more than a smooth-talking scammer. "Don't worry, baby," she whispered into the phone. "The transfer went through. He's gone, and no one will ever know." In that moment, Darius knew every person he loved had traded his trust for something cheaper. Money, less power. Ways. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He simply stared out the window, whispering, "So this is what my blood became." Days later, Barrister Connell delivered a small brown envelope to each member of the Cohn family. No return address. No stamp. Just their names written neatly in black ink. Sarah opened hers at the breakfast table. The moment she read the first line, her cup fell from her hand. It said, "To the woman who loved another man while wearing my name." Tommy got his at the office. His heart stopped when he saw, "To the son who sold his father's soul for a bribe." And Adeora received hers in the mansion. Inside was a note that read, "To the daughter who sent her father's sweat overseas for a stranger's love." Each letter ended with the same haunting signature, "From the man you buried too soon." The family went silent. For the first time since his death, fear filled the Cohn mansion, not of ghosts, but of the living man they had betrayed. Months passed, and the world had already moved on from the tragic death of Chief Darius Cohn. His portrait still hung in corporate halls, but his name was now just a symbol, a memory used by those who had replaced him. But Darius wasn't gone. He was alive, sharper than ever, and ready to reclaim everything they had twisted in his absence. With a neatly trimmed beard, gray hair, and tinted glasses, he became someone else entirely. Mr. Kola, a quiet, well-mannered investor from Ghana. No one recognized him. Even those who had worked for him for years didn't suspect a thing. He dressed simply, spoke softly, and carried himself like a man with money but no ego. Exactly the kind of person the greedy Cohns loved to underestimate. Through a secret company registered under a false name, Darius began buying small chunks of Cohn Group stock. Bit by bit, he built his stake until he silently owned more of the company than his own children. From the shadows, he watched how badly they were destroying everything he built. Tommy, now calling himself CEO, was reckless and arrogant. He threw huge parties with company funds, flaunted luxury cars, and made deals that drained millions. Adeora, now head of public relations, was more focused on social media fame than saving the business. Together, they were running the empire into chaos. The company's reputation was sinking, investors were panicking, and the board was losing confidence. That's when Mr. Kola appeared. He walked into the office one morning, dressed in a dark suit and carrying a simple brown briefcase. "Good day," he said in a calm tone. "I heard Cohn Group needs an investor. Perhaps I can help." Tommy's eyes lit up. "We've been waiting for someone exactly like you," he said, shaking Kola's hand eagerly. He didn't know he was holding the same hand that once raised him. Kola offered to invest a large sum, pretending it was emergency funding to keep the company alive. He spoke politely, asked few questions, and observed everything: the lies, the tension, the desperation. Adeora, desperate to keep the deal, began turning on her charm. "Mr. Kola," she said sweetly, leaning forward, "you must visit us more often. We can discuss business. And perhaps friendship too." She smiled, not realizing the man she was trying to impress was her own father. Darius looked at her quietly, hiding the heartbreak behind his glasses. "My dear," he said with a faint smile, "some partnerships are better kept professional." Each meeting revealed more of how far his children had fallen, not just financially but morally. They lied, cheated, and begged behind fancy smiles. When Darius left the building that evening, he stood by his car, staring up at the company's name on the tower. Cohn Group, his life's work, now drowning in greed. He whispered to himself, "Let them dig their own hole. I'll be there when it's time to cover it." The months that followed were a disaster for Cohn Group. Under Tommy and Adeora's greedy leadership, everything Darius had built began to crumble. Deals collapsed. Investors pulled out. Employees resigned in waves. The once mighty company that had symbolized strength and success was now sinking like a ship with no captain. Inside the offices, panic spread like wildfire. Tommy shouted at everyone, blaming Adeora for every failure. "You're too busy posing for cameras to notice the numbers," he yelled during one meeting. Adeora fired back, "At least I'm not wasting company money on girls and champagne, Tommy." Their mother, Sarah, tried to calm them down, but even she had her hands deep in the chaos, moving money around, trying to protect her personal accounts before the walls caved in. By the end of the quarter, losses had crossed billions of naira. The board of directors had enough. One gray Monday morning, they announced their decision. Cone Group would be dissolved. Tommy slammed his fist on the table. "You can't do this. This is my father's legacy." The chairman sighed. "Your father's legacy died the moment greed took over." That's when the doors opened and Mr. Kola, the quiet investor they had almost forgotten, walked in. The room went still. He placed his briefcase on the table and said calmly, "Before you bury this company, I have something to show you." Tommy frowned. "Now's not the time for lectures, Mr. Kola." But Kola only smiled faintly. "Actually, it's the perfect time." He pressed a button on the remote. The lights dimmed, and the projector screen flickered to life. At first, it showed a blurry clip. Then came the voices. Sarah's voice, laughing softly with Chief Nkem. "Now that he's gone, we can finally merge everything." Tommy's voice, handing over files. "Tell your father the board's next move. I want my cut." Adeora's voice, whispering over the phone. "The transfer went through. No one will ever know." The footage rolled on, clear, undeniable. Every betrayal, every lie, every selfish word. Gasps filled the room. The board members looked from one family member to another in shock and disgust. Adeora covered her face. Tommy went pale. Sarah's hand shook violently as she tried to stand. Then, a final clip appeared on the screen. Darius's voice. "If they love money more than blood, let them prove it." The room froze. The color drained from Sarah's face. That's impossible," she whispered, stumbling backward. "He's dead." Kola turned toward her, his calm smile now sharp with meaning. "No, Mrs. Cone," he said softly. "There's only one man who can fix this mess, the man you buried." Sarah's eyes widened, her lips trembled, and before anyone could speak again, she fainted, collapsing into her chair as gasps filled the room. Tommy and Adeora stared at Kola in silence, their world spinning, their lies unraveling. And in that moment, Darius Cone, hidden behind the mask of Mr. Kola, finally took back his power. The room was frozen in silence. The footage had ended, but the shock still hung heavy in the air. Every face turned toward Mr. Kola, the quiet investor who suddenly seemed too calm, too familiar. He slowly removed his glasses, then his fake beard, then the gray wig. Gasps erupted across the boardroom. Tommy's mouth fell open. Adeora's hands flew to her face. Sarah's eyes widened in horror as her voice cracked. Darius!" There he stood, alive. Chief Darius Cone, the man they thought was dead. The man they had buried with crocodile tears and fake speeches. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Darius just looked at them. The wife who betrayed him, the children who plotted against him, and shook his head slowly. Adeora broke first. She dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Papa, how are you alive?" Darius's voice was calm, almost cold. "I died the moment you chose greed over gratitude," he said softly. "You didn't bury me in the ocean, Adeora. You buried me with your lies." Tommy tried to speak, stammering. "Father, please. It wasn't like that." Darius cut him off. "Save your breath, Tommy. I watched you sell our company secrets for pocket change. I saw you both destroy what took me a lifetime to build. You celebrated my death, but I came back to see who would survive the truth." Sarah stood trembling, tears running down her perfectly powdered face. "Darius, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," he said. "You were planning a merger with the same man who envied me my whole life. Tell me, Sarah, how did betrayal taste after the champagne?" She covered her face, unable to look at him. The room was dead silent, the weight of his words suffocating. At that moment the door opened, and Barrister Kunal Adio stepped in, holding a thick brown envelope. "Chief," he said respectfully, "I believe it's time." He placed the envelope on the table and took out the real will, the one no one had seen. Darius nodded for him to read. Kunal's voice echoed clearly through the room. "As stated in the true and final testament of Chief Darius Cone, all properties, businesses, and accounts are hereby transferred to one person, Matteo Onifade, loyal driver and friend." Gasps filled the room. Adeora's crying stopped. Tommy shouted, "This is a joke. He's just a driver." Darius turned to him, his face hard. "Yes, Tommy. A driver. But also the only man who never lied to me, never stole from me, never pretended to love me for what I owned." Sarah fell into a chair, speechless. Dora sobbed louder. Tommy slammed the table, red with anger and disbelief. But Darius didn't flinch. He signed the final papers in front of them, his pen gliding across the page. Then he looked at Matteo, who stood humbly by the door, tears in his eyes. "You drove me through storms," Darius said softly, "and through betrayal. Now you'll drive the legacy." The room filled with stunned silence as Matteo bowed deeply, his voice trembling. "Thank you, Chief. I only ever wanted to serve you." Darius smiled faintly. "And that, Matteo, is why you deserve everything they never did." The news spread like wildfire, faster than anyone could control. The blog was screaming the same headline: "Billionaire fakes death, exposes corrupt family." The footage from the boardroom, the affairs, the secret deals, the betrayal, had been leaked online. Millions of people watched in shock and disbelief as Darius' once perfect family was revealed for what they truly were. Clips of Sarah kissing Chief Nkem in hidden hotel rooms did. How could she do that to her husband? And she had everything and still wanted more. Tommy and Adeora's scenes came next. Their voices caught on tape as they discussed stealing funds and forging signatures. There was no escape, no spin, no saving their names. Sarah couldn't leave her house without cameras flashing in her face. Reporters camped outside her gates, shouting questions she didn't have the strength to answer. Her charity foundation froze her accounts. Invitations vanished. Her so-called friends stopped answering her calls. Overnight, she went from the city's most elegant woman to the queen of betrayal. Tommy tried to run, but the police caught him at the airport before he could board his flight. Adeora was arrested at her luxury apartment downtown. Both were charged with fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy. Their mugshots flooded the internet, turning into memes that everyone was sharing. The same people who once envied their wealth now mocked their downfall. Chief Nkem's empire collapsed next. His companies were raided. Contracts were cancelled. The government launched a full investigation after Darius' team handed over files proving years of bribery and corruption. By sunset, Nkem's office was locked, his bank accounts frozen, and his reputation gone. The mighty man who had stolen another's wife and business ended up losing everything, even his freedom. But in the middle of all that chaos, one name began to rise: Matteo. The driver. The man no one ever looked twice at. He had no fancy degree, no mansion, no designer suit, but he had something far more powerful: loyalty. TV stations began calling him the man who stayed true. His calm, humble interviews touched the nation. When asked how he felt about inheriting Darius' empire, Matteo said softly, "I didn't serve him for money. I served him because he was a good man. This blessing is just proof that faithfulness still matters." People applauded. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag loyalty wins, hashtag the faithful driver. As the world watched the mighty fall and the humble rise, Darius' story became more than just a scandal. It became a lesson. In a world driven by greed and lies, one man had reminded everyone that sometimes the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, are the real heirs of greatness. Months passed after the chaos. The headlines faded, the noise quieted, and the city slowly forgot. Far away from the flashing cameras and scandals, Darius now lived a peaceful life in his countryside villa, surrounded by green hills, tall trees, and the laughter of children. He had started a new foundation for underprivileged kids, using his wealth to give them what his own family had lost: values, hope, and love. Every morning, Darius would walk through the fields with a cup of tea in his hand, watching the children play football on the open ground. Their joy reminded him that some things in life can't be bought or betrayed. Matteo, now the official director of the foundation, handled everything with calm and grace. He still called Darius Sir, though Darius often laughed and told him to stop. They worked side by side, not as master and driver anymore, but as two men rebuilding something pure from the ruins of greed. One afternoon the mail arrived. Among the usual letters and invitations was one with shaky handwriting, from the women's prison. Darius opened it slowly. The paper smelled faintly of tears and regret. It was from Adeora, his daughter. Her words were simple, but they cut deep. "Papa, I lost everything, but I found the truth. You were testing love, and I failed. I was blinded by pride, poisoned by greed. I see it now. You wanted us to understand what love means when money is gone. Sorry. If I ever walk free again, I promise to live like the daughter you raised, not the stranger I became." For a long moment Darius said nothing. He just sat there, staring at the letter, his heart heavy yet strangely calm. Then a single tear rolled down his cheek, not from pain but from peace. He whispered softly, "Even a broken mirror shows the truth once." He folded the letter carefully and placed it inside his journal. Matteo, who had been standing by the door, asked gently, "Bad news, sir?" Darius shook his head and smiled faintly. "No, Matteo. Just healing." The sun began to set, painting the sky in gold and orange. Children's laughter echoed in the distance, mixing with the quiet sound of the evening breeze. Darius leaned back in his chair, finally free of the ghosts that once haunted him. He had lost his family to greed, but gained a new one built on kindness. He had faked death to reveal the truth, and now, in this quiet corner of the world, he was truly alive again. And as night fell over the villa, Darius whispered one last thought to himself. Some lessons are painful, but the peace that follows is worth every scar. Months later, Darius stood on a grand stage at an international leadership summit, not as the broken man who once faked his own death, but as a living symbol of truth and wisdom. The hall was packed with powerful people, journalists, and young entrepreneurs eager to hear the man who turned betrayal into a lesson. Cameras flashed, lights glowed, and the room fell silent as he stepped up to the microphone. He smiled gently, his voice calm but full of strength. "Wealth reveals character," he said slowly, pausing as the audience listened closely. "But death exposes loyalty." The words hit like thunder. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even wiping away tears. It wasn't just a speech. It was a truth everyone could feel. Darius had lived it. He had watched his family celebrate his death, steal his empire, and destroy his name. But in the end, loyalty had come from the one man no one ever looked at twice: Matteo. As the applause grew louder, Darius looked to the side of the stage. Matteo stood there in a simple black suit, watching humbly, his eyes full of pride. Darius raised a hand toward him and said, "This man taught me that loyalty can't be bought. It's earned with honesty, sacrifice, and heart." The crowd erupted again, and Matteo bowed his head, overwhelmed. The camera slowly panned out, showing Darius and Matteo standing together, two men who had faced greed, deceit, and death itself, and still stood tall. Text appeared on the screen. They celebrated his death, but he came back to bury their lies. As the lights dimmed, Darius walked off the stage toward the sunset outside the glass doors. The golden light touched his face as he whispered to himself, "Peace at last." He didn't need revenge anymore. He had truth, freedom, and a clean heart, and that was